we are here to um, hopefully revamp our planning board regulations. This is a public hearing, so Cassandra, would you mind reading the notice, please?
I would not mind, and of course, I temporarily forgot it was a public hearing, so I don't have the notice ready, but I can grab it in 2
I'm
seconds.
sorry.
No, that's okay. My mind is in Christmas mode right now.
I'm trying to get this all done tonight, so.
Okay, here it is. Pursuant to section 81Q of MGL Chapter 41, Chapter 40A, and the Cohasset zoning bylaws, the planning board will hold a public hearing on the Zoom platform, webinar ID 859-0664-1780, password 393480, on Wednesday, December 18th, 2024, at 6:30 p.m. on updates to the rules and regulations governing the subdivision of land, Cohasset, Mass., dated November 30th, 2016. The full text of the draft update is available for viewing in the town clerk's office, Cohasset Town Hall, 41 Highland Avenue, Cohasset, Mass. 02025, during regular business hours, Monday through Thursday, 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m., Friday, 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. Electronic copies of the draft can be found on the Town of Cohasset website, www.cohassetma.org/214/planning board. Any person interested or wishing to be heard on the proposed update should attend the public hearing at the time designated. Signed, Thomas J. Callahan, Chair, Planning Board.
Okay, thank you for doing that. So the last step in the process of redoing our bylaw and just is to get the regulations and all of the other rules, the other things we use to governs our activities in order and cleaned up, neatened, modernized, and put all in one place. The email I circulated, I guess, yesterday, or today, I can't remember which now, said that this is mostly a housekeeping thing, but what I had sent out, I mean, originally, my hope was to do a single volume of all regulations of all the land use boards in one spot, similar to the way the Commonwealth and the federal government organize their regulations. And I realized from the get-go that that would require each board to, approve its part. But, in discussions with Carolyn, that was too cumbersome. So then I just narrowed it down to the zoning bylaw related stuff. And the things highlighted in yellow in the table of contents are permits that are within the purview of the zoning board. So we are not going to deal with those. We can't pass those. They'll have to do that. And I brought this up to them, and they received this draft a few weeks ago when you did. The marijuana provisions, is that the zoning board or is it the planning board? I think it's the zoning
Planning
board.
board, I believe.
I
Is
was
it?
going to say, I believe it's the planning board, but we haven't had one, so I
Yeah, all right.
have
No,
to look back.
I wasn't quite sure. So
Yeah, because it's specifically medical marijuana, which
yeah.
is very limited.
So just to go over this briefly, we have common driveway regulations. And then we have the subdivision regulations that are in a separate piece of paper. So part of this is to put everything in one place. It's easier. We just took from town meeting, moving the solar and wind related application materials to regulations. So that's what this does. The other things regarding the special permits and the site plan reviews, basically sections 2, 3, 4, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. Those all are similar as moving application type materials and what we want for applications into regulations. And it's sort of anticipating editing the bylaw in the same way, different parts of the bylaw in the same way we did the solar and wind, to get the application material out of the bylaw so they can more easily be adapted to changing practices. So I don't know, and this would be Carolyn's guidance, and I haven't gotten a definitive answer if we should deal with those, now and set them up because of the potential that there may be a conflict with the bylaw, or wait until perhaps the bylaws get amended in the same way we did wind and solar. I don't care either way. The ones I really want to focus on is, we need to do section 1, we need to do 5 and 6. We need to do 13 through 17. And so, we can discuss them as we go through them, but that's the goal of this, is to just really get things all in one place. Hopefully the zoning board will, do this, but again, some of these things, like we did the wind and solar, may require changes in the bylaws themselves. Get all the application material out, put them in these regulations. So, what I'd like to see happen tonight is we pass what we can pass, and, other things can be left to the future. And whether I'm on the board or not, I can still, help with, getting these other things in shape or put together so that they can be passed at some point in the future. So with that, do we have any members of the public? I can't see right now. Do we have anybody out there?
You do not.
No zoning board members? Didn't expect that. All right. And this section 1, so by the way, so this, the original draft of this was written quite some time ago in anticipation that the bylaw changes we were making would also have taken special permit application materials out of the bylaw and site plan application stuff out of the bylaw, but we didn't do those things. So again, whether we need to do the regulations related to it is up to us right now. But this section.
Tom,
Yeah.
I have a couple of high-level questions before you get into it.
Yeah.
One is
Progress.
there's a
Who's got
weird
more than-
echo.
Amy, you
Yeah.
somehow logged in twice again.
If you have more than one device logged in, we're gonna get that feedback.
One is I didn't see any editing. So I guess where we have an existing regulation, and in particular with the subdivision regulations.
Yep.
And the common driveway regulations, where we have an existing one in place. I didn't see what was changed. And if you imported the text, there's nothing that highlights what might be a significant change that you made relative to the previous
No,
version.
As I said in the email I circulated again either yesterday or today, the common driveway one is pretty much substantially the same as exists now, other than the fact that, if I'd have to go back and compare it to the.
Sure, no,
thing,
I understand that.
But
Tom,
it was just, it was,
words have meaning.
no, I know, it was just updated to deal with the change in the bylaw regarding.
Recording in progress.
Who's doing this?
Not me.
Me.
All right, just one device, please. The major change we made with the common driveway bylaw was the number of houses that could be served by it. So the regulation really just reflects that change. Otherwise, the specifications, the construction specifications, all that stuff is the same.
Right,
When-
but like on the first page that you had, you had regulation, and then in red you showed changes of editing the document.
What, right here?
Yeah, just there.
Yeah, I just did that
And-
10 minutes
and-
ago because,
and that's I guess what, without having
oh,
what
my
we
God.
have in place now to look at and
Then-
what you're proposing, it's very hard to see what changes you've made or talked about without even the major changes being highlighted.
Again, there aren't, my email today told you, or that email I just sent gave you the highlights of what has changed. There aren't major changes in it. It's just a reorganization of them and an updating of most of them. That red that you see up there at the top of the heading is done 10 minutes ago before
Okay,
the
that's
meeting.
fine. But
Because,
you understand that
because we're
the
no
point I'm trying to
longer,
make is I'd like to know what the difference
well,
is
if you'd let
between
me
what
talk and
we
go
have
through
in
it rather
place
than.
as a regulation.
Right.
Point of order, one
Jesus
person
Christ,
speaking
this
at
is
a
why I'm
time,
quitting,
please.
Yeah, all right,
Chairman, continue.
all right. The change in the heading is simply because we're not dealing with the zoning board pieces of it, okay? Originally, it would be one text, it would be one volume for both boards.
I understand that.
Okay,
How do
then
you
let
how do
it
you
go.
deal with the content changes, Tom?
Then let it
How do you
go.
expect
right?
how do you expect the planning board as a responsible party reviewing this with you to take to know what you've done?
Well, if you'd let me go through it, and if you read it and compared it yourself, I'm not here to do all your homework for you.
Okay, Tom, you didn't have to be snippy with me. I'm just asking
All right.
a basic review question because at the end you're going to ask us to vote on this.
No, you're absolutely right.
Mm.
All right. Section 1 is something that I had come up with, and this is all new text. This was really intended to apply to all the permitting boards so that we were all on the same page. We were all accepting the same types of plans. We were all getting the same plans. This section E, by the way, this is something that has bugged me for 30 some odd years, because we were on the Conservation Commission in the early 90s. And there was a project on Beach Street, up at the top of the hill on Beach Street, up at the top of the cliff. And the applicant gave the Concom one set of plans and gave the other boards a different set of plans, completely different and substantial things. So I've always wanted something in our rules and regulations for all the boards, basically, to put in writing the requirement that you can't play a game like that. And who knows how many times it's been pulled in years since, but so this is just a lot of general practices that we follow for the most part. Yeah, Amy, go ahead.
I would just like to ask if what we're doing now can be converted from a prospect of us voting on it to a conversation about the items that you have listed and why they are important. I agree with Mr. Brewer that this may be for us old information, but for the public, it is going to be perceived perhaps as new information. So if you introduce it as new information with the expectation that another meeting may be necessary, but that at that point, everybody that's interested in this will actually be informed.
We have what? We have nobody here.
Well, I'm just trying
Okay.
to, I'm responding procedurally. Mr. Brewer is probably correct that for you to introduce new information about how our board should work, in the absence of us having any pre-discussion about this, is likely to lead us to a situation of line by line edits as opposed to a philosophical expression of the way in which you would like to see and we would like to see the planning board operating.
None of this is rocket science, people. I don't know what you expect to. You've had this for weeks. I don't know what you expect to do in another meeting. it's, you let me frigging explain it to you, you'll see that it's not rocket science. But whatever your pleasure, you want to continue it to another night, that's fine.
Uh,
We'll just
I would
prolong my
simply like to
agony for
say-
another meeting.
for the purposes of the public,
The public isn't here, okay?
absolutely, but this is the record. And so the public needs to be able to look back at the record. So
Yes, which you
so-
keep interrupting so that I could explain it to you and the public.
Well, you know, the
I'm-
reality is the
I'm not
video
sure.
will live. The video will live in the town's archives
Yes,
for who knows how long.
yes, and I have yet to be able to
Just
explain what
because
this
no one
is.
from the public is here doesn't mean you can disregard that fact.
I didn't
Yeah.
suggest to do so, but I would suggest letting me explain it to you and the public, and then the
It-
public can make its judgments. If you want to take a vote in January,
Mr.
fine.
Chairman, all we're asking is for you to introduce it as information that will be regulating the practice of the planning board going forward. We may or may not vote on it in its entirety, but the public needs to know piece by piece what we're trying to do and why it's important.
May I continue so that I can explain that?
So I would just ask you to confirm that that's what you're going to do.
That's what I was trying to do for the last 15 minutes now.
All right, so now what we have is an introduction to a change in practice, and you're now going to explain to us how that's going to unfold.
Can you still see the screen?
Yes,
Section 1 of these regulations. The title speaks for itself. I don't think that anything in there is different than what we actually do in practice. It's just not on paper anywhere. This is an attempt to put it all on paper. I know that Cassandra, did you not have some comments on this? You know, numbers of copies that I may put the wrong number, but this is simply intended to memorialize in writing our current practices on the basics of what an application should look like. And it should be uniform to all boards, but for the purposes of this, we're just passing a regulation for the planning board. Okay.
Tom, I didn't double check with your comparing your definition for variances.
Forget the variance section, Clark. It's a zoning board issue, or I
Well, we
told you in the email that we
no,
were not.
well, that's
going to-
not the point. The point is I haven't cross-checked the language of. Did you take the variance section out of this? I mean, because the
Can you let me go
the
through it
draft
section by
regulation that-
section, and I will explain what we're dealing with tonight and what, see, look at the variance section, it's highlighted. I told you in the email yesterday or today that we were not dealing with the zoning board related material. The zoning board will deal with that. Okay, whether they do it in this form is up to them.
But
So
that
we're
wasn't
not
the
dealing with
point.
variances,
That
okay?
wasn't the point. Did you cross-reference the variance description that we've changed in the zoning bylaw with the variance language that you've put in this regulation? Same
What are you
would be
talking about?
for special.
What are you talking about? Where is the variance language or the special permit language?
Listen, Tom, I'm really trying to be,
No, you're not, Clark, but go ahead. Tell me where it's different.
Tom, you're being abusive and I don't like it. I'm just asking a question about, for example, the variance section
Yes,
and how it relates to the variance section of the zoning bylaw.
what part of what it says is not clear? Tell me, you gotta ask me a specific question, Clark.
Point of order, you were just asked a very specific question, Mr. Callahan, and that is to relate a pre-existing set of materials to the current materials. And an answer might be that the former materials, said X, and the new materials will be in accordance and say X and Y. We're not going to get very far if we don't acknowledge that what you're trying to do is to close a gap in the practice of the planning board on the basis of the lack of regulations. And if you produce enough introductory material, then people will understand why you're using the first piece, section 2 variances, but you have to actually.
Look, how many more times do I have to say this? We are not dealing with section 2 because it is a zoning board.
I am using that, excuse me.
I used it as an example too.
Yes.
All right, so what about what it says in that text is not understandable? It is.
It's not that it's not a matter of understanding, Tom. It's I asked the question whether it was coordinated with what's in the zoning bylaw. Now Amy may have asked a slightly different question about the same thing, but
I said to you all a few minutes ago that these sections that relate to the variances and the permits and the special permits and the site plan were originally written in anticipation that the application materials that are in the bylaw would be removed, like we just did for the wind and solar bylaws. They're not removed. So to the extent these regulations would create a conflict, and I don't think they do, it's just adding material that we want to see in these applications, then don't promulgate them at this time unless and until the bylaw is changed to take application material out of it. Okay? Very simple. Just don't deal with it. Okay? I told you at the beginning that I wanted to focus on 1, 13, and the one other thing I want to focus on is the design guidelines, but 1, 13, and the subdivision ones. That's all we have to do for this at this point in time. That's all. The rest of it can wait for the future for somebody else to deal with.
Point of order. It is unclear to me what we're trying to do. And
We're trying to pass updated regulations of the planning board.
let her finish, Tom.
Tom, I'm not finished. What are we, I'm asking a couple of questions. Number 1, what are we trying to do? Why are we trying to do it? And what is it going to mean? And we have gone all the way through changing the bylaw, but there are regulations underneath each element of the bylaw.
Yes.
You're assuming that we can just grasp your thinking about how this should be executed, when in fact we have not gone through this in a systematic way with all the members of the board so that we know what it is, why it is, and what it's going to mean. So I would have started this conversation with a bigger opening and saying, as part of the change in the bylaws, there underneath it are regulations. I'm going to talk about only a few of those regulations. The remaining will be addressed in the future. In that way, anybody listening might know that we're not dealing with a whole slew of things. We're dealing with very specific things, and there will be future circumstances where we will be dealing with other things.
Look, a much longer memo was sent by me about this, I don't know, 2 months ago, at the beginning of November. This has been explained to you on this board in detail as to why it's being done and what is being done. All right. I started tonight by showing you the table of contents, and with the shorter email that I sent out yesterday of what we are not dealing with tonight, because they are zoning board material on the advice of council, that the zoning board will have to take care of those. Fine. I also said to you at the beginning that the provisions regarding specific permits are largely in anticipation of making the same type of changes we just did to the solar and wind bylaw, but they haven't been made yet. So again, we don't have to deal with them. Other than that, with respect to the Village Harbor and 3A, there is one thing I think we should deal with about the design guidelines. And that I said further that for tonight's purposes and for what we, the bare minimum to pass to clean up our regulations is section 1, 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17. I don't know how much I could make that clearer to you all. And the detailed memo you got a month or so ago explained all of this ad nauseum. I can't help if you don't do the preparation when you come to the meeting. I'm trying to get through it in a way that you can all grasp it and understand it. And you're getting hung up on procedure or whatever. I'm not sure what you're getting hung up on because you're not letting me try to explain this. So if you don't want to continue tonight and you want more time to look at the material that you've been given, fine, let's continue this to January, whatever our first meeting in January is. Okay?
Well, it would be
Or you can let me show you what
It-
the highlights, what the changes are in these.
Why
things
don't
that
you
we
go through
explained
the,
in the email
Tom, why don't
yesterday.
you go through the minimum that you've just suggested and that we punt on the rest? Because it would be very useful. I printed out a copy and reviewed it, but it's your final version. That doesn't show anything that you've changed or any highlights that, yes, you did send a couple of emails with highlights, and I have copies of those in front of me, but it doesn't really say what you changed content wise. There's no indication whatsoever what's different about these than what
Yeah,
took
because
place.
you
And
keep
yes,
stonewalling me
yes,
on
I could go
explaining.
through the current regulations with these side by side, but it seems like you would have an edited version like you did on the top of the introduction that I had brought up.
Right now, we only have 2 sets of written regulations regarding common driveways and subdivisions. Okay? Sneak ahead to that. Let's go to that one. Where is it? All right. Let me find it. Where is it?
Tom, as you're scrolling, may I make a suggestion?
What?
So I certainly think that you should give the overview of what you're proposing here, but if there are board members that would like to see more of a redlined version specifically for the common driveway regulations and the subdivision regulations that are already pre-existing, if you wanted to discuss them now and then we could prepare a redlined version prior to the January 7th meeting for board members to look at.
I frankly am not going to probably have time to do that, but I would try. I would make the effort. I've always made the effort.
By we, I mean, I could certainly help you with that. But it seems like having a redlined version might be helpful. That way folks don't have to have, 2 different sets of regulations in front of them to compare and contrast.
Understood already. Well, never mind. I can say it. Here's the common driveway one. Okay. If you knew the regulation, you'd know that it isn't, most everything there is what's there today. Okay. What is added is this, as we change the bylaw. So it references the new bylaw section. And what is the main change of the bylaw section is the number of houses that can be served by the driveway. The rest of this is the specifications of how you build a common driveway. And all of that is in the current regulation. So that's it. That's it. Right. Subdivision is a written document that's, I don't know, what is it, 30, 40 some odd pages long? And it's quite lengthy and quite confusing. And what I've done with the subdivision regulations is just break it up into 4 more easily digestible parts for the public and for the board. So general provisions, and again, these all come from the existing regulations. The one substantive change that I mentioned in my email is this right here, because we at town meeting have made development impact assessment and mitigation part of the subdivision process, so that is added. And then there are places in here where we reference the highway surveyor. That's been changed to the Department of Public Works. I think there might have been references to the Board of Health, where that's been changed to the Board of Public Health as it's named. Otherwise, and then the separate section now on approval not required. A separate section on preliminary plans and a separate section on definitive plans. By separating them into the categories of subdivision, it's just easier for the public to find them. Easier for the public to know what applies to each particular step in the subdivision process. And just easier to digest by breaking it up into 4 pieces. The text, other than what I added about the new Article 11 and updating the references to town departments that are out of date, is the same. I have neither the time nor the inclination to redraft the subdivision rules and regulations. Perhaps that needs a review, because I don't know when the last time they were looked at. But since we don't have a lot of subdivision work going on, it hasn't been a critical issue. We are going to be facing, as we all know, Jerusalem Road Estates will come along sooner or later. And that'll be the largest subdivision that this board has dealt with since it dealt with that one 25 years ago. So, somebody may want to look at these, the actual substance of these rules and regulations and change them, but I didn't. I just reorganized them and put them in a single spot for everybody's reference. Right? Now, go back to section 5 and 6. These are the regulations we just moved at town meeting. So 5 and 6 is all the text verbatim from the prior bylaw that we were moving out and accomplished at town meeting. That's what 5 and 6 are. No other changes to the language. It's never been proposed to be changed. All right. Now, this one. Again, the application materials for this may need to be redone to make sure, whether we pass this, we just want to make sure there's no conflict with the bylaw itself and what the bylaw is requiring for applications, because the bylaw will govern and control. But here, okay, the design guidelines for the village and the harbor, I wanted to make change from guidelines to regulations. Gives them a little more teeth. Make sure that they're applied. Again, not changing the text of that document. And I mentioned in my email yesterday that you recall when 55 South Main Street came along, they took something in the guidelines that said one thing and came up with that modernist building design, and we all rejected that and wanted something more colonial looking. And, so perhaps the guidelines, which by this would now be regulations, need to be looked at again and perhaps updated. Regarding 3A, anticipating the the MBTA district. We discussed this from time to time, and it's been brought up by members of the public, particularly when a particular building was built at Stop and Shop Plaza. It would make the design guidelines that we have for the village and the harbor now applicable to the commercial areas of 3A. That's a substantive change. Okay, so with respect to the design guidelines, 2 substantive changes: make them regulations instead of guidelines, and apply them to 3A as well as the village and harbor. Okay. And then going back to 1 is just to put into on paper what we generally require as uniform standards for applications. And I think Cassandra had some tweaks on some of the numbers of copies or something. So
That's correct.
that's, yeah, and I don't know, that you'll have to just show me so they can be incorporated in it. I know you sent me an email about it somewhere. I just didn't get a chance to incorporate it because I was too busy the last month.
That's fine. Basically, for the rest of the board members' knowledge, it's just updating numbers of copies that we currently require and the types of copies that we currently require from applicants to match what is in the written. I think when these are written, they were still requiring something like 19 paper copies to be submitted to the office, and right now we only need 2. So it's just kind of cutting down on paper waste.
And again, that's why we have these kinds of things in regulations, is because the practices will change from time to time. When we used to be so paper reliant, and now we're more electronic reliant. And who knows what changes may be in the future, and they're easier to deal with through a regulation than they are through amending a bylaw. So those are the, again, 1 and 13 through 17 would be the ones I'd want to immediately act on. Not tonight, maybe at the next meeting. And 5 and 6, because 5 and 6 we just did at town meeting. These other things that, 3, 4, and 7 and 8. I can take a look to make sure that the additional application requirements that those regulations are proposing don't conflict with the bylaw, because we wouldn't have a conflict. Can't have a conflict. And if later the application materials in the bylaw regarding special permits and site plans, and even if the zoning board agrees with variances, if those all get moved to regulations, then those regulations can be updated accordingly if and when that happens. Right now, we would just need to do regulations to supplement the bylaw in ways that we feel should be supplemented. And, a lot of my proposal here is that applications should all have detailed narrative descriptions. It's hard, for me at least, it always has been hard just to deal with plans and the application form that the town provides, because it really doesn't tell you a lot of what the applicant is proposing. And I'd like to see that in writing in a narrative form as part of the application before the meeting. Obviously the applicant will describe what they're going to do, but I think it's important to have a description, a detailed description of what is being proposed in writing ahead of time. And so that's why you'll see narrative requirements through these different specific regulations. So that's the nutshell version. Again, the major substantive thing you are looking at here is really beefing up the design guidelines by bringing them to regulation status and expanding them to 3A. Both 3A commercial and 3A MBTA districts. So again, we get buildings that are within the visual character of the town, consistent with the visual character of the town. Any questions, comments? Can't see. Hold on, let me get you back up on screen. I can't see who's got his hand raised. Anybody? So, you want to discuss the philosophy behind this, let's just take the subdivision regs, for example, all right? Going through it and catching highway surveyor and updating it to DPW, you know, that's, I presume I caught them all. Can do a search and try to make sure I did. The quote unquote substantive change is to just break it up into 4 pieces rather than the long gobbledygook that it is today. I just think it's easier to follow that way.
Well, it helps to know that you didn't make any that you didn't make any content changes to the subdivision regulations.
No, but
I
that
still
doesn't
think
mean
it
they
would
shouldn't
be-
be looked
I
at.
still think it would be useful to have the edited version, the changes that you've
Wow.
put together.
The extent I
part
can,
of
to the extent I can
approving.
do that easily, I'll do it, but I don't know that that'll be easy. The current subdivision regs.
Well, at the very least, it would be useful to have, and I have a copy of the subdivision regulations when we're reviewing and approving, to have both of them out, and go through them to just confirm that, anything of content, is properly discussed.
Yeah, I mean, the subdivision regs that I gathered were in a PDF document. I had to convert PDF to Word, cut and paste.
Well, there should be a Word document.
There isn't.
There should be.
Well, there should be, but
It,
there's
it, well,
at least
I mean,
not one that I could access.
Joanne updated the subdivision regulations, and it might be 10 years ago, but she completely updated that. There should be a file somewhere
Yeah,
in the
and the only, everything that's there in those 4 sections is from the existing. Of course, in the existing, it doesn't set off a section general that applies to all the types of subdivisions, but that section, which what is it, 14? Is, again, all existing text, perhaps moved from where it is today, but that's it, moved. But all the text is there, and I suppose even on a PDF document, I could either by computer or even by hand tell you, look in the existing and show you where it is in the new stuff. So it's, but again, I didn't do any textual changes other than the update, the references to town boards and positions that have changed, and to add in the general section, the applicability of the new Article 11. So that was it. And the same for the common driveways. Again, I'll put together a comparison, but you'll find that it's all there. It's really that first paragraph that references the new bylaw section, and that's really the only addition to it. The design specifications are all the same.
So Tom, with that comment, does that mean that what Cassandra suggested as a path forward in terms of the document and then those items that have been redlined or changed be carried out so that the members of the planning board can follow the changes? For some, they weren't even on the board when this occurred. And for others,
When what occurred?
when you indicated that you had distributed a document that was basically parallel with what you just wanted for us to hear.
My detailed memo in this draft went to you within the last month and a half.
All right. And what I'm saying is, for some of us, maybe we are involved enough and experienced enough to follow that path and read it and understand it. But for probably at least 2 of the existing board members, that may not be the case. So it would be practical and professional to enable them to understand the differences between the past and the present and why you're making these adjustments. For a lot of people, I suspect, once we've got bylaws, it's not clear to them necessarily what is the connection of regulations. Whereas it's clear to you, and it's clear where things need to change, And so we can't speed as fast as you can, but we care as much as you can. So that's why,
I'll do what I can to make this simple for you, but I can only do it so many ways. I have tried to explain it in a longer memo. I tried to explain it in the short email yesterday. And you've had this material in front of you, for whatever, however many weeks before tonight. I'll take another stab at it, but,
I'm not asking you to rewrite what you've
I'm
done.
not going to, Amy. I'm not going to. I'll make it easier for you. If what I've represented to you is not, it's not going to change. I haven't changed substance other than what I have told you here tonight and what I had told before in a memo or in an email. Okay, it's not going to change. But I can't read this stuff for you all. I try to explain it. I try to tell you that, yes, it's not rocket science to me, and it shouldn't be rocket science to you, particularly if nothing's changed. It's just put in one place and reorganized. That's it. It's another housekeeping thing, like much of the bylaw was. Just bringing it up to date to put everything in one place that's easier for the public and the applicants to access and use. Not so much for the board, but more so for the public and the applicants, but it'll help the boards too if they have everything in one place. I'm leaving the substance. If the subdivision regs, if Clark's correct, I think you're right, 10 years ago might have been the last time they were looked at. Okay. In anticipation of what's coming down the pike, you might want to take a glance at them and see if they do need to be updated again. I'm not engaging in that endeavor. That's not the point of this. The design review, guidelines, okay, they become regulations, but the text of them and, whether they create some conflicting interpretations as we found with 55 South Main Street, that's for somebody else to take a look at. When were they last done, Clark? 2020, 18? I think they were looked at.
Sorry, can you ask that question again?
The village and harbor guidelines, they probably haven't been looked at since they were passed, right? In like 2018. It might be time to look at them again. And again, look at the experience.
Yeah, it's probably been 5 or 6 years. I mean,
Yeah,
it was
I mean,
first-
but that's for
it
somebody
was
else
the
to
first
do.
draft that came out when we passed the original zoning changes. But they lived as a draft for quite a few years.
Yeah, and to the extent, again, as an applicant like the one at 55 South Main makes some conflicting interpretation that leads them to a modernist building as opposed to what we really intend to have by the design guideline.
Hey, the subdivision
maybe the
regulations
language, language they relied on could be eliminated, it could be edited,
Excuse me, Tom, the latest version of the subdivision regulations is dated from my old blue binder, is dated July 1st, 2018.
Okay.
And I don't know exactly what was changed then but it was an update. And these guys, the guys in the E Code 360 have all that. And we should have it if we rewrote that somewhere in the archives of Town of Cohasset Planning Board.
Sandra, correct me if I'm wrong, I was working off the PDF that you get from the planning board page, correct?
Just to clarify, we're talking about the
Subdivision.
subdivision.
Subdivision
Yeah.
regulations of land is in my my last version of the blue binder, and it's dated July 1st, 2018. Chapter 325.
2018 or 2016, because
2018.
the
That's from
version
the
that's on file with the clerk's office is 2016.
Okay, this is from, I believe, E Code 360.
All right, so
Regardless,
regardless, what I have put before you in the reorganized format is whatever 30-odd page document that Cassandra gave me, which I believe is the one that the town clerk's office has. If there were changes made in 2018 and not incorporated, somebody needs to see that they're incorporated. I would also suggest to you all very strongly to look at them with again, completely fresh set of eyes in anticipation of what's coming down the pike at Jerusalem Road Estates. But that is not my intent. My intent is simply to organize them in a different way. That's it. So it's using the existing text of whatever version, 2016 or 2018, that is presently available on.
So Tom, the subdivision regulations as a complete document that has details and forms and all kinds of things that that you didn't include in your draft, but presumably would become a part of it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, at the very least, it would be useful for all members to have, I mean, I have a paper copy of what you've drafted. I have a paper copy of section 325 that has the 2018 date. I'll double check and see what's on the E code 360 and see if that jives with it.
Yeah.
And if there's changes, we've, kind of got to review them one at a time.
Yeah.
And that's fine.
And those changes can be made, either as part of this if you want, if you can do quickly, or it can be done later, but I would. I didn't get what I was working from E360, so there might be, it might be very well the case that the 2018 updates didn't get written anywhere, but they're there somewhere,
Clark
anyway,
makes a great point.
that's a different thing. So I'll just show you that what I'm proposing broken up into 4 pieces where it all comes from the existing, so that you know, so that you can compare the two. All right, and then the proposals with respect to the Village of the Harbor in 3A. I want to do the part about the design guidelines, but then I'm also going to double check that the additional application requirements in these regulations are not in conflict with the bylaw. If they are in conflict with the bylaw, we take them out. If they're not, and these are supplemental materials that we'd like in addition to what the bylaw says, great, keep them in. And then again, going back to section 1, section 1 is really, Cassandra can make the edit that she needed to make about the number of copies, but it's really just putting on paper what is our longstanding practices, but not set down on paper anyway. So. And there's a form that goes with that, the consent form with, an applicant consent form and an owner consent form. So all the white things of forms from the existing regulations, yes, I did not put in this version yet, but they would all be attached and still be available and unchanged from what they are today. I'll leave it to you guys to make any more substantive changes beyond that. I just want to leave you really with the new format, or a new organizational format. That's all.
Can I just
Alright.
make a clarifying note? So yes, Clark, you are correct. Ecode 360 does say 2018. As I was just quickly flipping through, it looks like there were forms that were amended, like applications, things
Yeah.
like that, and they were added in. So those could be the amendment that was done in 2018 versus like the full body of text
Sure.
was just the 2016 one. So the document that Tom was working off of was the 2016, which also doesn't include the forms, which is why you don't see them here. So I'm going to presume that I'll look into it, but I'll presume that the body of the text hasn't changed and it was just the forms that were added.
When you get a chance, then send me a link to the form that I can tack onto the end of this.
I'm also assuming that these forms are out of date because we have updated them again with the practices that we do, but I can send you the new ones to it. We
Well,
can
the other
add as
thing-
like
the other
attachments
thing-
at the
yeah,
end.
And the other thing too is to, in places where it refers to a specific type of form, we can just add language that says, you know, something to the effect that, you know, a form for this is available, you know, the current up-to-date form for this isn't available from the planning board office.
That might be the easier method.
Yeah,
just
rather
because
than-
we frequently update them with changing times and things like that.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, in terms of the subdivision one, like, you know, just add a section to the general provisions that says, you know, any forms that the planning board requires for these applications are available in their up-to-date version in the planning board office. Something as simple as that, and that covers, that at least puts an applicant on notice to make an inquiry if there's a specific form that they need. So,
I'd like to make a recommendation that we be a little bit more specific than that, Tom. There's a lot of paperwork that goes into the planning board's actions. And if there is a page number or a column header or something, it would be very helpful for the public if they could access that on the basis of a referent. So
Aren't our various forms available on the website through a link?
They are.
Okay. I mean, I think in a general sense, everybody knows that there's probably a form that goes with filing an application for a town permit. You know, we can simply tell them that without, you know, unless you want to create a laundry list of forms, but those change from time to time too. And if the forms are also available right now by clicking a link on the planning board's site, webpage.
Well, Tom, excuse me, just, I opened up the E Code 360, chapter 325, subdivision of land. So they have general references and then attachments for forms and figures, like we used to have for, table of dimensional regulations. So
All right, well,
you want to put
I'll take a
your,
look at it because I hadn't
so
looked
you
at
want to
it.
put your updated draft of the regulation in place of the chapter 325 subdivision of land, or parallel to it? You know what I'm getting at? In our bylaws, we have chapter 325 subdivision of land. It looks like it's everything that's in your regulation, with the exception of the forms that we talked about.
If I recall.
So are you suggesting that
Well,
your,
then why have we?
section 14 through 18 replace what's
Well, why
here?
have we had why have we had this document, this 30-some odd page document that says the subdivision rules and regs if it's not different from chapter 325 again is a bylaw. So
Right.
I've always read it to be a short and simple general thing, and the meat, the specifics are in the regulations, and that's why it's a separate 30-some odd page document. If the bylaw text is that long and has all the things in the regulation, then you don't need a regulation, or you shorten the bylaw. You shorten the bylaw to general principles and you refer to the regulations, which can then be more easily changed from time to time as needed. So I'll look into that. I'll look into that and look at the text again that's on 360. But I didn't have access to the E360 version. So stop it. Sit down. Sit down. Yeah. All right, if there's nothing further, then I guess we'll continue this to our first meeting in January. And have me a few weeks long. Is that how we want to deal with this?
Well, I
Yeah,
think
unless
with the
there's
understanding that there would
and-
be
Go ahead.
there would be a, based on the, what's been said and conveyed during this meeting, we continue it, but with the understanding that there would be a red line strikeout version of this that shows the changes from current to that shows the current and proposed changes. I mean, it's a red line strikeout, and Cassandra, you probably know this. I mean, Microsoft Word has a feature on that where you can
Yeah,
compare.
I'll do that, but again, I've told you that there aren't that many substantive changes.
Doesn't matter. I
All
got
right, that's fine.
this.
I'll
I've been
do it.
quiet this whole meeting, Tom. People want that on this meeting that are in attendance here, and people want it to be memorialized for people that aren't maybe not in attendance here. So if it can be done before then, we can get through it.
I don't have any problem helping to do that
Yeah,
well
that's
ahead of the
okay.
meeting. I'm guessing that we could probably accomplish that the week ahead of time. That way people have time to absorb it, particularly with the holidays coming up.
I'll take care of it. I'll try to probably take care of the end of this week before my son gets here, so get it out of the way. When is the next meeting?
January 7th. You know what? I'm like 95% positive of that, but let me just confirm before we do a motion to continue.
Yeah, I thought you had given us an email recently about.
Apologies, I'm glad I double checked. It's January 8th.
Okay. All right, and I'll make a motion that we continue this public hearing to January 8th at 6:30 PM, January 8th, 2025 at 6:30 PM.
Second,
Is there anything else going to be on the agenda that night? You mentioned, I think, a site plan.
There is a site plan in the works. I have not received the application yet. So nothing else unless you got an A&R in that I'm not expecting. There will be
Yeah,
nothing else on the
well,
agenda.
Try to make every effort to move that to the next January meeting after that, so that we don't have to, we can focus on this. All right, all in favor of that motion to continue?
Clark Brewer, aye.
Tom Callahan, aye.
Amy Glassmeyer, aye.
Kevin Heine, aye.
Good. I'll see you then. I'll get the materials to you as soon as I can.
Thanks for all your efforts, Tom. It's much appreciated. Have a good holidays,
Yeah,
everyone.
all I
Happy
ask is
holidays,
that you-
everyone.
All right, happy holidays, everyone. Yeah.
Good night.